Hello, I'm Luke, the Hard Times Guy. In my last video, I talked about starting a new vent and talking about some of the life decisions we make and maybe using a card playing analogy in some of that and talking about some of the philosophies that different people that I listen to from time to time have about life. But I've been struggling since then, and so you're going to have to struggle with me today. The thing I've been struggling about is a gentleman named Townes Van Zandt. I don't know whether I've mentioned him before in videos, but I could have. He's somebody I recently discovered, sometime this summer probably. And I knew a little bit about, not him, but some of his music before I ever discovered that he was connected to the music that I was familiar with. And I want to say that he's an incredible songwriter to start with. But before I get into what is so incredible about him, I want to challenge you to go find out about Townes Van Zandt. If you don't know who he is, go find out. Get on Google, get on YouTube, search Townes Van Zandt. Listen to his music, learn everything you can about him. Whether you watch this video or not, you need to do that. If you already know who he is, then this video might bore you before you ever get to something that I can say about him that's worthwhile. I am going to say some things towards the end of it that are different from some of the things that you may have heard if you know Townes Van Zandt or know of him. But I'm going to repeat, he's an incredible songwriter. He basically spent his life and career being incredible, being mostly unknown and underappreciated or unappreciated for what he did and what his work was. And although he wrote some songs that would have made most people rich and famous and set for life, he spent most of his adult life in poverty, or at least in conditions that most of us would look at and associate with poverty. He suffered from young adulthood to the end of his life with a condition called manic depression. And there's lots of famous people that were manic depressive, and you could learn about their struggles and you could learn about their successes, and some of them lived their entire life dealing with it and being medicated for it, and became very competent and very successful living their lives. But Townes didn't deal with his very well. In fact, he spent most of the time self-medicating with alcohol and cocaine and other self-prescribed drugs, and consequently his life was full of pain and misery and confusion. We'll stop just a minute and regress a few videos ago, or I don't know, maybe 10 videos ago. I don't know how long it's been, but I had a video about Kris Kristofferson. The title of it is something like, does Jordan Peterson listen to Kristofferson, or something like that. And in that video I talk about Kristofferson, and I talk about a couple of songs that he wrote. Maybe more songs than that, I'm not sure. I didn't go back and review it before I started this. But I said in that video that Kris Kristofferson was maybe the greatest songwriter of all time, and in his genre, I'd stand by that. The kind of songs that he wrote, that for the country and the pop country and soft rock kind of a music listener, Kristofferson changed the world with his songs. He opened doors and new venues and new ways to go with his songs and his lyrics that, from the 1970s to today has just changed the music world. And I still stand by what I said. I think Kris Kristofferson's the greatest songwriter of all time. at least for songs like the ones he wrote. And there are others I could mention. I think recently John Prine died from COVID. He lived a full and productive life, but I don't know, he might have been a little bit older than me. He got COVID a year or two ago and he died. But John Prine is another one of those fantastic songwriters that contributed greatly to the kind of music I like and changed things with his creativity and his brilliance. Steve Goodman, Willie Nelson, I could add people like that to the list, and it's a long list. You could go on and on. Guy Clark would be in there. I shouldn't even start a list because I do injustice to so many of the people that are so good. But today, one of the get to our times right now, our contemporaries, Chris Stapleton. Man, that guy can write and perform. But I mentioned all that to say this. The sheer genius and talent as a writer and performer that I attribute to these people. I put Townes Van Zandt in their company. Somebody many of you never heard of. I put him in the company of Chris Christopherson. And I'm going to go on about that in a minute and tell you why I'm even more in awe of Townes Van Zandt. But I got to stop again and change the subject. I had a sister named Diane. I'm the oldest of 5 children. It's me. My brother Kurt's 2 years younger than me. He was born in 49. Diane was born in 51. Amy was born in 54. And Clint, the youngest of us, he was born in 58. Clint died of cancer just a few years ago. Kurt, Amy, and I are still living. Diane died in 1985. She overdosed on lithium, which was a prescription drug that was prescribed to her because she was manic depressive. And she, like Townes Van Zandt, lived her childhood and teenage years and maybe even into early 20s functioning like normal people, or at least as far as anyone could tell. She was a brilliant young lady with no problems. She was the valedictorian of her high school class, and she put herself through Indiana University on academic scholarships and part-time jobs, and she got married and seemed to be a young lady with a bright future. But manic depression overtook her. And in 1980 or thereabouts, she was in the city of Phoenix, and she was standing in the middle of a 8-lane highway getting coded messages from the radio and screaming at traffic as it passed her by on that boulevard in Phoenix, Arizona. She was arrested by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department and put in the hospital there. And eventually somebody got hold of me, and I flew to Phoenix and retrieved her, brought her back to Bedford, Indiana, and for a time she lived with Betty and I and our children in our home. And I only say that to illustrate to you that I have some insight from that experience in manic depression. Because those early days of Diane's illness and what I discovered of it, from dealing with her situation there in Phoenix and closing out her estate and going through her things in her condominium there. The things I observed there, and then the things that Betty and our family lived with. When Diane was first in our home, while medical staff at Bloomington dealt with her and her diagnosis and her progression from out of the pits of hell into being someone back with us and a functioning, contributing human being. I experienced that, so I'm familiar with it, familiar with some of it. Because of my sister Diane, I celebrated the little victories with her as she struggled and returned to normalcy and getting control of her life. But then in 1985 I learned how fragile all of it was when in a short period of time she lost control again, and as I said, she overdosed on her meds and died. Let's get back to Townsman Zandt. I have gained insight into things that have haunted me and tormented me about my sister. And what could I have done and what should I have done and questions like that. But I've gained insight into her and her condition just from coming to know Townsman Zandt. And not only that, but I have come to appreciate immensely what Townsman Zandt accomplished in spite of his illness. And the most incredible thing about him is he lived his life for years in that daily hell of pain, misery, confusion, suffering, uncertainty. He lived that and struggled with it and wrote and performed his brilliant music in spite of it. We'll stop again for a minute and mention his family. And you'll learn, if you don't know this, if you research it, you'll find out he tried to be a family man. He had more than one wife, and he had children with different ones of his wives. He tried to be a dad, and I empathize with his family, not just his wives and his children, but his parents and his brothers, sisters. I don't know whether he had a brother. I know he had a sister. I empathize with those folks, and I know how they could love him and yet hate him or hate the things that he did when he wasn't who he really was. And again, I'm just in awe of how he died when he was 53 years old. I'm in awe that he made it to 30 years old. That he didn't somehow kill himself or do something that caused someone else to kill him. And when you're online, most of it's blamed on his alcohol abuse and his drug abuse. And I'm not excusing him for his alcohol abuse and his drug abuse. no way am I trying to do that. That's not ever a solution, whatever your problems are. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it is incredible, given what I know about the malady that he dealt with, that he managed to do anything at all, much less write the beautiful music that he did and play the guitar the way he did. And so I can sit and listen to Townes Van Zandt all day. I can get on YouTube and go down a Townes Van Zandt rabbit hole. And you know me, I love sitting and listening to acoustic guitar players. And I love sitting and listening to the music they make and the songs that they sing. And I can sit there and cry with the best of them. He's even got a video which has an old black man sitting there crying over a song and he's singing. I don't know why that old black man's crying about that song, but I know why it makes me cry. Uncle Seymour Washington, I think's his name. In fact, I think that video is immensely popular because of that one thing. Townes brought Uncle Seymour to tears on camera. I don't know, all his songs have an immense amount of pain. The person that comes to my mind when I think about how his pain and misery comes through in his music, the person that I think about mostly is Janis Joplin. Janis had that same ability in her performance, in her delivery of her music that Townes does, and I think it's not really a technique or a delivery, it is from the depth of their emotion, feeling that comes through in their music. And I first noticed anything like that as a young man in Janis Joplin and some of her songs and some of her pain. Probably most of it self-inflicted, but I'm not judging, I'm just saying I saw it there. And Townes is that way. And the songs that he wrote, they all have those characteristics in them. Probably the least one that I'm familiar with that maybe you could look at and think it's a normal kind of a song is Poncho and Lefty. Yes, he wrote Poncho and Lefty. Until I started getting into this, I thought probably Willie Nelson or Merle Haggard or those two jointly wrote Poncho and Lefty, because their version of it was the one I was most familiar with, and I just assumed one of them wrote it. Townes Van Zandt wrote it. Then I heard Townes talking about it, and he talked about the writing of it, how he wrote it, and how it was about two people that he saw on TV. I don't know the exact times period, but I think it's 2 weeks. He said he saw these people 2 weeks after he wrote the song. And he says that in all sincerity. I mean, think how confused and twisted and that is. But I've heard him say it on several different live videos. How can a man that out of touch with what's really happening be as brilliant and as functional as he was is beyond me. And some of the other songs he writes this one song about crickets. If you can keep up with what's going on in that song, you're better than me. It is so incoherent and so unconnected and so insane and yet so captivating. I don't know how he does stuff like that. And the song that I mentioned that Uncle Seymour sits there and cries about, waiting round to die, or waiting round to die, sitting here waiting round to die, is the title of that song. What kind of title is that for a song, waiting round to die? What kind of lyrics are those? What kind of person writes something like that? Sad. There are other songs that he writes, which there's one I can't remember. I think it's some silly little lyric about gambling and the Queen of Spades and or the Queen of Diamonds, I think. What is that song? I think Mr. Mudd's part of the title of it. It's hard to make sense of. He claims a big pencil came down from the sky and wrote that for him. He's dead serious when he tells you that. There's other songs that he says came to him in his sleep. He's talking about one that he wrote when he was staying in Nashville with Guy Clark, and he wrote a song. It's a great song. Can't remember the name of it, but he wrote that song in his sleep. He said came to him in a dream, and he woke up and wrote it down and went back to sleep. Scary to think about things that he does and did. Last one I'm going to mention is a song called Tecumseh Valley. It's a song about a young woman. He describes her. Her name was Caroline. He describes her and her life and her place in life, and basically she's in a situation that's nearly hopeless. And she leaves home, leaves her dad behind. I think her dad's ill. She leaves him behind. She goes over the mountain and she goes to this place and she's looking for a job. She finds one. And her hope in life is to make enough money to go back to her and get her dad or be with her dad again. That's what she's working for. That's what's keeping her going. It doesn't work out well. She's about ready to try to go back and get dad. Word comes to her that her dad died. And when that happens, she views life as not having any hope at all. And she quits the job that she has and she becomes a prostitute on the street. Eventually she dies in misery, and she's got some note in her hand. She's found at the bottom of the stairs next to the tavern where she used to be a bartender. And this is, according to what I read, based on somebody that Towns knew, somebody from his life, a person that he knew and wrote a song about, based roughly on them. And one of the lines in the song, again, gives you insight into his state of mind. He's never sure about anything. He doesn't, there's nothing black and white to him. He even when he sees something, he's not sure he sees it. And he says about this girl, he's fond of this girl. He says, it seems to me, or it seemed to me, sunshine walked beside her. And I take that to mean is he saw something really good in that girl. He saw something worthwhile in her and her being and how she lived and what she tried to do. Or at least he thought he did. He's not sure. Sure enough to write a song about her. Sure enough to say that twice in the song. Seemed to me, sunshine walked beside her. But even that, he's not locked in on that. He's not sure of it. And I want to close this video by saying it again, two things. One thing is, it's incredible to me that somebody who doesn't have any more grasp on the reality of this moment and is what's going on around me really happening, somebody that doesn't have any more grasp than that, Townes Van Zandt did, can survive for 53 years and write the brilliant music that he wrote and perform and play a guitar the way he did, and even sang. When he was young, his voice was good. He lost that as he got older and abused his body more. It's amazing to me that he did that for as long as he did it, or that he did it at all, one time even. That's number one. Number two, he's helped me a little bit understand my sister a little better and her struggles. I didn't get to all the points I wanted to, and I didn't touch on everything I wanted to, but I think that's enough. I'm not going to try to go back and fix anything. I'm going to tell you, if I hope this encourages you to acquaint yourself with Townsman Zandt. He's worth knowing. I'm the hard times guy. You have a good day.